Recording in progress. Woohoo. Okay, so I closed the chat and we are live. So welcome to the new Entrepreneurial Women's event. Today has been a little bit of a tech challenge, getting things all to connect. And actually in a Thankful Thursday post today, I just wrote that I was thankful for technology. So feeling a little less so right now. But no, I'm super thankful for technology and all of what it allows us to do and the way that it allows us to connect virtually. Actually, I've made a lot of friends virtually, some of whom I have ended up meeting in person, and some I still have not met, but we still stay in touch. So that's fun. So today I want to talk about procrastination because it's one of the things that has come up as one of the biggest challenges that we face, I think, as entrepreneurs for sure, but also as people. Procrastination is a thing. And I also know that it makes us feel like crap procrastinating, even though, well, I'll get into all of that. It has nothing to do with not having self-control or being lazy, which I think is a sort of a stigma that I know that I think sometimes about myself. And so the term procrastination in the Latin comes from to put off until tomorrow. But in Greek, it also means to do something against our better judgment. So it's actually kind of like a form of self-harm. And that's Dr. Pierce Steele, who is a professor of motivational psychology. He also wrote the book, The Procrastination Equation. He says that it's a self-harm, a form of self-harm, that it makes us feel rotten. And having that self-awareness of how it makes us feel, and then we're going to get to why we do it in the first place, is, for me, just knowing sort of like the science and neurology behind it makes so much difference in how I personally tackle it. So hopefully it does for you too. So there's also Dr. Fuchsia Sirois, and I'm not sure I'm saying her last name correctly, but Dr. Fuchsia, anyway, she's also a professor of psychology. And she says it's essentially an irrational thought because it doesn't make sense to do something that we know is has a negative consequence in the long term, but it's a choice that we make because it's an inability to manage our current mood. Our brains are wired to take care of our needs in the here and now. You know, if you subscribe to the fact that we evolved from having to take care of our immediate needs, we need community because to be off on your own meant a lack of surviving. And so our brain is kind of wired in that way, where we need to take care of our immediate needs. A future self is kind of like a person that it's somebody else in our Neanderthal brain. So we have to consciously imagine our future self. It's not something our brain does naturally, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So in short, we procrastinate due to a bad mood, which is ironic because we essentially procrastinate, and it could be something like cleaning the bathroom or starting that book that we've been meaning to write, or a blog post or something like that. So the emotion that comes up with it depends on the thing that you're trying to procrastinate from, but it could be boredom, anxiety, insecurity, frustration, resentment, self-doubt, a whole slew of different emotions and thoughts that come up. And those are what we're trying to avoid when we procrastinate. And depending on the task at hand, so I made a list, like cleaning the bathroom, it's just unpleasant. And that might be why we're avoiding that task. Maybe we're trying to create some kind of spreadsheet, a tedious thing. Analyzing data is boring. Well, at least to me it is. Some people, I suppose, love it. Maybe writing a book, a blog, sales copy. That can bring up emotions of what if it's not good enough, or what if it gets rejected, or even just making a phone call to make an appointment, or to close a sale with a client or something. That can always bring up fear of rejection, which basically, what if I'm not good enough and they reject me? So any one or more of those emotions are going to be the thing that we're trying to relieve in the moment. It's more about the immediate urgency of managing that negative mood or emotion than getting on with the task that's going to have the longer term good effect. So when we compound a negative emotion, that task is still going to be there, and it then leads to increased stress and anxiety. And then we start to beat ourselves up over it, which there's even a term for that: procrastinatory cognition. Sheesh, I can't even say it. And that's about the thoughts that we have about procrastinating that typically come in the wake of doing it, of procrastinating. So that momentary relief is what makes it a vicious cycle. So if you think about because we don't do anything without a reward. So think about, what is the reward that you get when you procrastinate? You avoid all of those negative feelings, or any one of them. And that's that immediate, but then there's that lingering, shoot, I should have just done it. And also the task is still there. We still have to do the thing we were going to avoid in the first place. So over time, that leads to chronic stress, symptoms of depression, even psychological distress, low self-satisfaction, all kinds, even heart disease, because the stress and the cortisol is going to have a negative effect on our physical health also. So it's ironic, because we procrastinate to feel better in the moment, but in the end, we end up feeling worse. So the solution, that's the whole point. The solution is not another time management tool, a project management tool. Those things help us to stay organized. And actually, I actually love my project management tool, but I still tend to procrastinate. It has to do with managing our emotions in a new way. Our brains are looking for that relative reward. And if we have a habit loop around procrastinating, it's because we haven't found a better reward, and it's going to continue. It's going to continue to happening. We're going to keep doing it over and over again until we give our brain something better. So to rewire any habit, we have to give our brains what Dr. Judson Brewer, who is the Director of Research and Innovation at Brown University Mindfulness Research, or something like that, but Brown University. And he calls it the bigger, better offer, the BBO, the bigger, better offer. And it has to be intrinsic rather than extrinsic, because otherwise it's just procrastinating for something else. So a better reward than avoidance, one that relieves those feelings, those negative emotions and moods and feelings in the present without causing harm, that self-harm, to our future self. So, and it has to be internal and dependent only on ourselves. So self-forgiveness is one. And so approaching first of all, it's going to start with self-awareness and even realizing that it's happening. But when we have those negative emotions associated with past procrastinations, we have to let that go and just forgive ourselves for having done that in the past, which can be really hard to do. and have self-compassion and kindness and understanding to ourselves in the moment. And they've actually done studies on people who have managed to practice self-forgiveness and self-compassion, and they begin to change their procrastinating habit. And it doesn't happen overnight. It has to be a practice like everything else. It's a practice of realizing it's happening, forgiving yourself in the moment and for anything. So you're not carrying any of the past experiences into this moment right now. And then having compassion and understanding for yourself, understanding why it's happening, what is happening, and then reframe it so that reframe the task that's facing you, and trying to find some kind of positive aspect to it. Can you remember a time when you did something similar and it turned out okay, it turned out well? When we can focus on the outcome of doing that task and the benefit and how you'll feel about it when it's over, those are the things that are going to get you through that moment when you have the urge to go bake cookies rather than write that blog post, or organize the spice cabinet, is what an earlier example I had given. So if you can cultivate a curiosity around why that negative emotion is coming up, and then approach it from that way. What's the sensation happening? What's going on in your mind and in your body in that moment? Okay, so there's a story about a guy who was trying to study, and so he thought he would do some quick research and do a little Google search, but then one thing led to another, and he ended up looking at famous cats and then a famous person who had this weird disease, and an hour went by and he couldn't remember why he was on there in the first place. And oh man, I can't tell you how many times that has happened to me. I will even jump on to Facebook for a specific reason, maybe to message somebody or something. And the first thing that pops up grabs my attention. And next thing I know, I'm like, I can't remember why I was even on Facebook to begin with. Facebook's one of the worst for me. So what's happening in your body? What's happening in your mind when you're having this urge to do something other than what you should be doing? What feeling is it eliciting? Is it what emotion? Is it the what if it's not good enough thing? I don't know where to start, which really is probably like, I was thinking of writing a blog post, or for anybody who's thinking about writing a book, and where do you start? Like, what's the first thing? And I think those kinds of things really boil down to, what if it's not good enough? What if I get rejected? What if somebody laughs at me, or anything like that? But if you can pinpoint that emotion, what does it remind you of? What happens to that urge to procrastinate when you analyze it like this? When you notice it and you're curious about it and you're thinking about it in awareness, what's happening to it? Is it intensifying the urge, or is it dissipating a little bit? So just being super aware and approaching that with curiosity, and then focus only on the one next action. If you're trying to write that blog post, maybe you just put the date at the top of the page. And then what's the one next thing that you could do toward that thing that we don't want to do? Maybe it's open the email. Maybe it's look up that phone number to make that call that we don't want to make. But to just the focus on the one thing, the one tiniest next action that we can do, and making the procrastination as inconvenient as possible. The most dangerous thing that we tell ourselves is, it'll only take a minute. It'll only take a minute to jump on and update my Facebook page. It's just going to take a minute. But Facebook, as I already demonstrated, it's a rabbit hole, and it can take an hour or more hours out of your day. And then away from that thing that you want to be doing. So if you set up an if then scenario, if I'm tempted to procrastinate, then I'll whatever the thing is, that will bring you back. Maybe the thing is, I will write in my journal something about the self-forgiveness and self-compassion thing. How can you design a strategy around, because the studies show that this works. How can you design a strategy around being forgiving of yourself for procrastinating, having this loop, because it's going to keep happening until we give our brain something better, bigger, better option. So the if then. And I haven't mastered this yet, but I'm going to do it. Put my phone away when there's something that I need to get done and focus on. I've gotten better and better at it, but I don't actually put it away. I do put it in do not disturb mode, but I need to just not even have it in front of me as a temptation. So setting up your environment in the best way so that those temptations are gone. I actually know a guy who has a giant desk. And when I was touring his office, his desk has a computer on it, one little laptop in the middle of his desk. And I was like, dang, Scott, you are so organized. Look at your desk. It's everything's so tidy. And he said, that's not because I want to be. He said, I have to be, or I don't get anything done. So he doesn't have a pen. He has nothing on the top of his desk except his computer. And that's by design. That's to keep himself focused on the one next task. So I would like to ask you, what is the thing that you usually do to procrastinate? My daughter has told me, actually, that's funny because she's the one who brought this to my attention, that I procrastinate. And I think the reason is that I'm still able to accomplish something, especially if my task is an ongoing project that I'm working on, because there doesn't ever seem to be an end. When we have a digital business, there's always some other digital sort of non-tangible thing that we're working on. And when I am feeling like the blog post or thing that I'm trying to write, I'm always thinking it isn't good enough. And so when I decide to bake cookies, there's a start and an end. There's a product, a physical, tangible thing at the end that pleases other people. So I get good feedback. I get the satisfaction of completing a project. It's done. And it's a physical act as well, rather than just being on a computer and being creative when I don't necessarily feel creative in that moment. But motivation doesn't come first. First, the action, then the motivation follows. And this is hard to, for me, it's hard to assimilate, but I know it to be true. I can point to a number of times when I have experienced that, to just start. Who was it that said, I only write, it was a famous author, but now I can't think of who it was. I only write when inspiration strikes. And luckily, inspiration strikes every day at 9 a.m. So he set himself up in his office and in his daily schedule to write at 9 a.m. no matter what, because the inspiration oftentimes strikes as a result of getting started. So what is it for you? What's your go-to procrastination technique? Do you have something on there? Mary Sue, do you have a technique that is your go-to?
Let's see, my go-to. When you said Facebook, that is my procrastination. I get on there and I can get mired looking at other people's lives and quotes and things, and that is my procrastination.
Yeah.
But there's times when I will go outside and putter in the yard, and that's my other procrastination. But I find when I procrastinate, I do it, but I'm also thinking about the project at hand. And I set myself up, and And I intentionally do it sometimes. I procrastinate intentionally because it gives me time to process what I need to do and how I want to organize
Yeah.
it. So I'm doing that while I'm procrastinating.
That's actually very true. You do need to sometimes sort of ruminate on the task. And that's a form of creativity too. Just letting especially if you're doing something like gardening, where it's a little bit mindless and kind of like Zen, and putting yourself in that sort of meditative state where you can just let ideas come and flow. And yeah, that's actually valid. It's more about the procrastination is more about when it's time to sit down and do the thing, and then jumping on Facebook or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And I used to use, and I still do use, like walking or running sometimes, or hiking. And that's my other procrastination. But that does also at the same time give me time to think about it, because I've noticed that's when I have the best thoughts. But it is putting something off. It's like, I don't want to do this right now, so I'm going to go move.
Yeah, because it's healthy, because it's right, it's productive, it's healthy, it's
Right.
you're connecting. There's other good things about what you're doing. But do you find that you have maybe not if you're actually like being creative in those moments, and you're thinking through the process of the task that you're going to do, maybe not then, but if you're literally just choosing to do something other than what you really should be doing, do you ever find that you beat yourself up over it?
Yes, sometimes. Yeah, sometimes. But typically, I guess I find myself typically when I do that I usually resolve something when I'm procrastinating. There's always a resolution in my mind somehow. So
that's good, because that's a reward. That's giving your brain the bigger, better option, right?
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, there are some times when it's like, okay, you can't put this off anymore. You have to go do it.
Yeah.
There is that definite tendency to beat yourself up when.
Yeah. And then, it's kind of like with, anything that I sort of resist doing, my technique has always been, even something like, oh gosh, we were out at a lake a few weeks ago, or a river, not a lake, a river. And, but there was a nice little swimming hole, but the river is cold. And it was a super hot day, and we were going to leave pretty soon. And it was a chance for one last dip. And I was like, oh gosh, that water is so cold, I don't want to. And then I was like, okay, how am I going to feel if I leave here and I never swam? I'm going to be mad at myself. So I went for a swim, and it was icy cold, but I was glad I did it. So the same kind of thing, if I take that approach to doing a task, or whatever, that at the end of the day, if this is done, how am I going to feel about myself? How am I going to feel about this task, whatever it is, being done? Right. Even if I don't finish it, even if I'm trying to write sales copy and I just get maybe an outline, I'm going to feel so much better about myself and about the task in general at the end of the day. So I do have to, oftentimes, if it's something like that, think through the consequences. I'm going to feel crappy about it if I don't do it, and I'm still going to have to, and then I know I still have it to deal with. It's still there. So if I just get started, then I don't feel so badly about it. Plus, just the act of getting started starts the juices flowing.
Right.
The creativity juices. So what did you think? Did you hear anything new or in a new way?
Yeah, no, I definitely did it. And I guess, the self-harm, and I guess that, that really resonated with me, because I can definitely see that, because you do beat yourself up. It's like, if you write a to-do list and you don't do any of it, I mean, and then you're like, what am I doing in life?
Yes.
Why did I even bother writing it down? So I can definitely, so that was interesting. There was a lot.
I thought that was interesting too, actually.
Yeah.
That was that. Pierce, what did I say? Pierce Steele, author of Procrastination Equation, which I have not read, but I think that that I might want to do that. And I've heard of the motivation equation, which is, oh gosh, I'll have to find it. Maybe I can post that with this. Video will be posted on YouTube, and in the description, I will post the link to the motivation equation. It has to do with your desire times how likely you think you are to achieve the thing, whatever it is, divided by your distraction level, how distracted you are, times something else. Yeah, I'd have to look at it again. But there's an equation, and unless those numbers are balanced, it decreases the likelihood of achieving the thing. But that's a motivation equation, and I'm wondering if the procrastination equation is much the same.
Oh, interesting.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that, I bet.
Yeah, and just, when you talked about you procrastinate due to a bad mood or anxiety or frustration, self-doubt, that all rings so true for me. It's like I can think about it and I'm like, yes, I am self-doubting. I'm like, so I won't do what I need to do because I don't think I can do it.
Right.
But I know I can't,
Right, because you can remember other times that you did stuff you maybe didn't think you could,
Right.
or doubted that you could, and
Right.
it turns out okay.
Right.
The truth is that we, up to this day, today, this moment in time, we have a 100% success rate at overcoming obstacles in the past. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here right now. So if we can just focus on that and realize that we have overcome, we have achieved, we have done things in the past that we didn't want to do, didn't think we could do, maybe needed help getting done, but we still did it. And rely on that past success rather than beat ourselves up over past procrastination.
That's one of the things that I've tried to pass along is where there's a will, there's a way. There's always a way to do something.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when you procrastinate, your will isn't there.
Yeah.
Your will is just not there at that time.
Exactly. Yes. And the reason I like all of the teachings of Tim Fischel, Tim Pischel and Pierce Steele and all these psychologists is that they say it's not because we're lazy. It's not because we lack something. There's no mysterious curse on us. and it's not our own lack of time management. We're not flawed, in other words, that it's our brain, and we've given it that loop. And the more we feed into the loop of the procrastination, because the reward we get in the moment is we don't have to deal with that negative emotion. And so if we do the bigger, better option and practice those things, then we can get ourselves out of that loop. But the fact that it is like a neurological thing and it's not a personality flaw, I like that. I find that huge. Yeah.
Super interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's it for today. I'm going to try to link the motivation equation page, but I'll also research this, what did I call it? The procrastination equation, and perhaps even get the book and see if it matches up.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for
That's
coming.
awesome.
Thanks
You're
for coming.
Thank
Okay,
you.
we'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.